Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Curious Mind podcast. My name is Gabriel Ellis. I'm a psychotherapist and a scholar of early Buddhism. And as usual in our podcasts, I try to take deep dives into psychological, sometimes also spiritual topics. And today, my guest is Amiran. Hello, Amiran. We know each other
Hey.
from a Buddhist meditation group, and I was interested to talk to him today and to reflect on how realistically spiritual journeys can develop over many, many years. So I started dealing with Buddhism 20 years ago, and I can ask Amiran a little bit about his journey. So I'm interested in reflecting on that. You, Amiran, you have dabbled into many spiritual traditions, even though it seems that early Buddhism, which sometimes it's called Theravada Buddhism, and the meditation of Buddhism seems to be the closest to your heart. We won't get into the details of the individual traditions, but why don't you give us a little bit of a breakup of which traditions you dabbled into over the years? How long are you in the spiritual kind of game?
Yeah. So I remember maybe the first kind of encounters was this journey. Started in my childhood when I got the Mircea Eliade books from my mother, I think. So when he wrote about various trends of Hinduism. So that kind of got me hooked for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the next time was maybe 12 years ago when life kicked my butt a bit and I felt a lot of stress. And I started meditating. Initially, that was like a Kundalini Yoga practice. Which was interesting because that's pretty different to like a standard Buddhist approach. So like a bodily based and kind of energy based.
Mm-hmm.
And then after going to my first Buddhist retreat, I switched completely to the Buddhist framework because I found it the most kind of comprehensive.
Was it Theravada or was it a different school?
Yes, that was like a Burmese monk in. Yeah, we could call it, definitely Theravada lineage.
Yeah.
And since then, that was my main kind of point of reference. But I kind of read a lot and I was listening to a lot of different teachers. So the other kind of stream for me is more recently, especially being curious about different schools of Western psychotherapy and how they can inform the spiritual journey. Doesn't sound good for me at this stage, the name, but whatever we call it.
Yeah, I think we understand. Yes. My first question is, and I think you are the right person to ask that. Why to change? And I ask that because in many books, I think that we open when we ask teachers, it's very often emphasized patience, perseverance, stay with the technique, stay with the teaching, stay with the framework. You have to be patient. Without patience, you will drill small holes in different places, but you will not get anywhere. Now, my personal experience is I have kind of changed within lineages. My focus also was early Buddhism, but I was very interested in Advaita and other Indian teachings. I certainly have a background in Western philosophy as well. Obviously, through my work in psychotherapy, I'm interested in the psychological description of the mind and the possibilities and traps there. So I was not particularly persistent in one way of practicing meditation or one worldview. And you certainly have not either. Why not to do the simple thing and just stick with one, as everyone seems to suggest?
Yeah, I would suggest the same to anyone and see how how they do, how well they do. Because I wouldn't give such an advice to anyone like, yeah, definitely, man, like change all the time. It's just for me it was just like a necessity. I mean, and also like a kind of compulsion. And I you know, when you kind of invited me to do this discussion, I was wondering could I can tell anything to anyone, because I see more and more how it depends on like specific individual makeup, like a mental history and yeah, the personality structure. But yeah, from my point of view, I could definitely give a number of reasons of advantages of changing, of switching the perspective, so to say, because I think it gives more justice to, like, instead of like saying just change, right? So I think because there's so many factors in understanding these kind of teachings that impact your understanding, right? So one obviously is the teacher that you choose, right? And we could discuss, you know, how well do they kind of resonate with you and so on. But the teacher doesn't translate directly to your understanding, because you apply a lot. You kind of overlay a lot of your stuff, obviously, to what they are saying.
Okay, may I interrupt you here? Why is
Sure.
it that difficult? I mean, we open a book about Buddhist meditation, and then, for example, there might be a big chapter about breath meditation, which is one of the classic kind of early Buddhist meditation practices.
Yeah.
It's so simple. You just focus on the breath. Where is the complication coming in with the teacher and the mindset and this and the details? Why is it not that we just sit down and focus on the breath and then get the results eventually? Why the proliferation?
Yeah.
Why does it go into different directions? What keeps us from just sticking with that? The simplicity of it. Which sounds so much more reasonable.
Yeah, because I don't know. I don't want to sound like a smart ass, but it's you know, it's all about changing your perspective, right? And yeah, one way, and actually the way you put it is actually really good, right? Because this is such a simple instruction, like stick with the body, right? I would say that from my point of view, that was lack of discernment in just like regular understanding of that word. That what I thought I was, I thought I was watching the breath. Actually, I was doing a lot of different things, and I lacked an understanding of what's actually going on. I lacked, you know, kind of also conceptual, well, kind of mapping of concepts to my experience, right? So they were like completely separate. My experience and the concepts that I read about, that there's going to be, you know, mind and body and emotions and so on. It's not so much helpful. You just need to, my experience, like bang your head against the wall, and because the mind has momentum, your trajectory has momentum, and you will use these notions and these concepts for a while before you start changing them. And the whole point is to actually change your conceptual apparatus regarding your experience, right? So
okay, so if I may, I think people who do meditate might understand that, and for people who don't have so much experience, this instruction would seem simple on paper, just focus on the breath, right? Nobody can apply that. It is a misleadingly simple thing. It sounds like it's just easy to do. Everyone can breathe. And then I just observe the breath. What should be so difficult about that, right? But it's deceiving, because this is, I think, what you hinted at. When we look behind the curtain of what is going on, when I, in quotes, just try to focus on the breath, and with more intimacy with the process, when we increase our perception and our capabilities in that, we see behind the curtain and we see that there's utter chaos going on. I don't know what the breath is. I don't know who I am who is meditating on that. I understand that my linguistic understanding of the instruction becomes an obstacle at some point. I see that there is no simple phenomenon as breath. It seems suddenly to be a bubbling thing of many different things. My idea of what breath is, the movement, supposed movement of the breath. So behind the curtain, suddenly there's so many aspects of it. And then I have the same problem. What the hell should I do? Because the instruction now doesn't make sense anymore. I don't have just focus on the breath as something that I could just do. I have to pick some things, right? Is that more or less what you could...
Yeah, and this is actually the best case, because in the worst case, you will start doubting about the practice itself, or the teacher, or yourself, or maybe all of these things at once. So it kind of hijacks even the initial intention to do this thing, right?
And the doubt would be because there are no results, or why would I doubt?
Well, that's the question. So, I mean, all the things will start to come out, right? When you try to sit still, right? And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think I would frame it in a different way, that this is the goal, right? This is the opportunity, that some things will start to disrupt you, and this is like the gold in a way, right? So if someone told me that this is actually the interesting thing, what will come out? Why can't you just sit, right, in one place? And this is interesting, and this is the field of your research in a way, right?
Yes.
Then maybe it wouldn't be such like so frustrating, because oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the experience of people, I mean, when we were in the same meditation group, newbies came all the time, right? And then new participants came all the time, and then they get the instruction for, let's say we gave them a simple instruction of just to focus on the breath. What actually happens is they will sit there, they will get the instruction, they will understand that there's supposedly something simple that they have to do. Then the gong starts, they close their eyes, and I would say that immediately they have no idea anymore what they're supposed to do. They will try to catch the breath somehow, but then very quickly, I would say, for 95% of people, they will ask, am I doing this right? So the breath, and then there will be some thought and maybe a doubt, and then a question, and then it's like, I don't know, it doesn't feel very meditative what I'm doing right now. I'm not catching this. Probably I didn't understand. Now I cannot ask any question anymore. And I would say that very quickly people kind of fall into, what am I supposed to do here actually?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
And again, I would be even more pessimistic, that all these concerns tend to be sometimes almost like subconscious, right? So they are not like formulated clearly, because once you have like a question or a problem clearly formulated, then you can do something with it. But sometimes it's just like a fog, right? And you are not really sure what has just happened.
Yes, true. Okay, so let's jump a little bit forward. If someone sticks to it, if someone develops some genuine curiosity, which I think we agree is extremely important for this process, are there any results? We both sit here and we say, yeah, we switch techniques, we sometimes switch to another perspective. And I don't want it to sound as if there was nothing to it, and that it was all just, no results and pointless search without any crumbs on the way. Are there any results to meditation practice? What would you say from your experience?
Yeah, but the definition, like how I see the meaning of the word results changes. So I would always say that there are some results, but now I can see them on a completely different level. So what is distracting you, and it's interesting because being able to sit still and watching the breath without distractions is like the end goal. It's like, because if you can do that, it means that you can just be happy, peaceful, right? So in a way, there's nothing magical there, because that's the end goal. If you can do it, then it means that there are no problems. Otherwise, they would kind of disrupt you somehow, right? So it's like a journey. It sounds so desperate and pessimistic, but it's like a journey of finding like different kinds of problems. But also, okay, now the kind of hopeful part will come out of me. But with time, there's more and more sensing of underlying freedom. So behind every problem, if you understand it, if you comprehend the nature of it, there's a possibility of earning new kind of freedom in your life, basically, right? Like, forget about meditation and experiences. It's like, really, it will change your life completely, because if you don't see, then you are controlled by it, right? It's unconscious. So you will, and yeah, maybe I'm like too broad and general.
But, okay, so does that mean, what are you describing, that through a regular practice of traditional sitting meditation, we come out of the sitting and then we somehow perceive that our life or our perspective on a certain life issues change, and then you draw direct connections, like, oh yes, that somehow has to do with my meditation practice?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Okay,
so my point, yeah, my point is that and again, I'm probably like a really bad example, but in my case, the sitting is just a pointer to start maybe reflecting sometimes on something, and that may not be solved actually on the cushion. It's almost always like a symptom of something more general, right? That you can see throughout your life, right? And then with time, you may notice how this things actually disrupts you, not just on the cushion, but actually in your life as well. And I'm just, I'm just right now in a moment where I'm mostly focused on like really basic, like deeply rooted beliefs and convictions, which require like such a kind of 360 perspective and work. But yeah, sometimes there may be stuff that you will just notice and kind of learn to let go of it in the session. I guess this is the optimistic version, and I'm not saying it's not possible. I don't know.
Yes. Would you agree with the metaphor of the actual meditation on the cushion to be something like an artificial laboratorium, where I see maybe in high clarity a certain issue? It can be an attachment, it can be some doubt, some problem, or some small movement of freedom, and that I'm able to, when I go into the real world, there is a chance that I recognize a similar pattern that I have seen in clarity on the cushion. It's more fuzzy outside, but because of my experience with it on the cushion, I can apply it.
If it was the case, then that would be like the problem solved. If you could see something clearly, then it's great. And sometimes, obviously, you can create these conditions in your mind of this laboratory and seeing this problem clearly. If you see the problem clearly, that there's nothing more you can do. It's like perfect, right?
Yes.
The problem is that what does it mean, like laboratory, right? It's laboratory are the conditions where you can recreate something perfectly, right? But when you think about sitting on the cushion with your eyes closed, something completely unnatural to all of us, it will surface some problems, but other problems will be completely muddled. So it's not just and this is the tricky part, right? Sometimes you have to kind of provoke some tendencies in your mind to really see them clearly. But again, maybe I'm kind of too pessimistic. Ideally, you should have like this reproducible laboratory, right?
Yeah.
And see what works there. And only if you are kind of hopeless there, well, not only, but if you are hopeless there, then you start like looking at the bigger picture, and it will happen anyway.
It happens anyway. Yes.
Yeah.
So coming to maybe much more simple goals, I think the journey, the possibilities that you describe is quite, I think people who practice for a long time, they would share this experience. Is there any experience of joy or bliss in meditation? Is that pure advertisement, or is it something that actually many people can get?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the stage. So for me, like earlier, there was much more kind of joy and bliss than now.
It's interesting in itself. Someone who has no idea would maybe guess that it's the opposite, that you have to do and do and do, and then with time you get the skills, and then the joy and the bliss comes. Why?
Yeah, and probably it could happen as well. It could. It in my kind of mental model, it like depends on the shape. It's like in Tetris, right? Shape of the blocks that you can start taking out first. And this is also a mental model that you have to take out some hindrances, right? It doesn't have to be like seen like this, but it's I think this is really useful. So so initially in my model, what happened with me is that initially you gain some space and freedom by noticing some blocks that just like low-hanging fruit, so to say, and the mind and the mind gains some freedom and space in the moment. But with time, the more kind of ingrained patterns start to be kind of active in the meditation, and it's not that easy, and you start to work kind of around them, like gardener working around the kind of entrenched roots, right, to kind of take something out.
Yes. Yeah, it would be interesting actually to ask a good number of meditators their experience. I would agree. I think it was similar for me as well. For me, there was an additional aspect of, with later times, I was just not so interested in anymore, and kind of the joyful, the blissful experience, which might sound strange to people who are not meditating. Like, why not to use a button that makes me feel happy if I have it? It could almost sound like a goal in itself, but for me, it was kind of meaningless or superficial.
Yeah, or narrow, right?
Yes.
Well, that's the funny part, right? So, well, I would maybe frame it similarly, but I would say that what feels narrow now is how I understood happiness back then in the early times, right? So it's not that I'm like some kind of transcendental snob that like that like doesn't care about happiness. It's just that the understanding of happiness changes, and the true potential of what happiness may mean to you, right? As you grow, also your understanding of happiness grows.
Yeah.
So and here we are back to this kind of multidimensional space where you kind of upgrade your kind of technique, which I guess it's not really true, but also you change your understanding behind the scenes, and you think that you work on this technique, but actually what changes is your understanding. And this is so difficult because then everything changes. You start to understand the teaching in a different way, different light, right? There's a shift, right? So which may lead you to doing some changes, some different changes in completely different place.
Yes.
Of the practice.
And for me, at least, and I'm interested in your perspective on that. For me, at least, the things that help me on the way, right? So we read some teachings, we listen to a teacher, and it gives us some impulses, some new understandings, or something that makes me curious that I want to investigate. And at a certain point, this stops to be inspiring anymore. For me, it was like, okay, I exhausted my possibilities of what I can do with this technique or with this teaching. With my capabilities. I'm not saying that it's, you know, doesn't have kind of a lot of potential for other people, but at some point I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do anymore with this. I did what I do, and now I come to the next stumbling block. And then my natural movement was, okay, I need new inspiration, because otherwise I feel I could spend years just doing the same thing and hitting the same roadblock. So the confidence that the same teaching will provide new sources of inspiration or so diminishes, and that makes me look for something else. Is that similar for you?
Yeah. Well, I in my understanding, the key issue and the most interesting question always is, why the hell are you meditating right now? Like, why are you doing this? Why really are you doing this, right? And you can you know, I can look backwards and see how much there was like unconscious intentions to be somehow better than other people, maybe, or to be exceptional, right? I mean, and these things, like at some point you will notice them and you will work with them, and maybe they will somehow weaken these intentions. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, why would I meditate now if I just like cut like the main intention that like propelled me to doing that? And I hopefully I'm in minority, maybe I am. Maybe most people start with like fully wholesome intentions. But okay, just to be fair also to me, usually it's a mix, right, of wholesome and unwholesome, or like healthy or unhealthy, and you just start to see through them.
Now, is it important to ask for you, is it important to ask this question in itself, or are you really interested in an answer? Is it something like a, you know,
yeah,
people would use it as a mantra?
Sure.
Guiding,
Yeah,
or
that's a good point.
really look for what is it that I want right now, and then go in that direction.
I remember that early on, I was reading a book about actually breath meditation, and the guy like clearly said that you should start with just clarifying your intention. And I always like skip this, like, what the hell, I just want to start doing this, which means that not only I may have like unhealthy, let's not judge these intentions, but okay, I may, well, I'm not even clear why am I doing this, right? So so just, I mean, this is always the most interesting question, like question of your intentions. And we could probably, I mean, it could be like one way to look at the whole endeavor, basically. Like, what's your intention? It's not the only way, of course.
Yeah.
So, but to get back to your question, yeah, I mean, let's keep it in mind. But it's obviously it's not an easy. It's, well, first of all, sometimes it doesn't have immediate answer, and sometimes it will be difficult to answer right away. But trying to answer it is a good first step, right? Like, why, and being honest with, okay, and this is like the most important, like being honest with yourself for me is like another way to like capture the spirit of the whole practice, like being honest with yourself. Why are you doing this?
So again, I'll try to give some context. I think we are again at a topic where I like to use the metaphor of pulling a curtain, where it seems like a simple thing. Why do I meditate? Why do I go to a meditation group? Why do I read this book? Why do I want to apply this practice? Obviously, I want to be happy. Simple as that, right? What could be easier? Some people could be a little bit more differentiated to say, I have difficulties to stop thinking. I'm burdened by planning and worrying. I want to stop that. Also a very simple intention, right? Or someone says, I'm so inspired by the Buddha, I want to be a bodhisattva, or I want to be enlightened, or something like that. Very simple answer. I think what you're saying is, and what meets my experience, when we actually sit down and open this, box of the mind, we see that behind all those seemingly simple assertions, there's always much, much more complexity going on. There is, first of all, I don't know what it is to be enlightened. I cannot imagine what it means to stop worrying. I don't know what it means to truly be happy. So I start with a poster, like an advertisement. It's not real. It sounds good. My idealistic mind kind of imagines that it wants that, right? It's like as a kid, I see the Star Wars Lego in the window of the shop, and I think if I had that, that would be amazing. And then when I actually get that for Christmas, a very different process happens. I get the thing, and then I'm in actual interaction with those stones and with the colors and so on. And there is some joy, and then there is the frustration of it not being that amazing anymore, or certainly different than what I thought. And there is something similar, I think, here, what you describe of questioning what my actual intentions were when I sat down, when I thought I want to be happy. I find out it doesn't mean anything. What does it mean, I want to be happy? I imagine myself jumping in the park up and down and there's a rainbow behind, or nothing phases me, no issue gets to me because I'm aloof and I'm always kind of equanimous. It becomes real at that moment, right? What am I actually looking for? So that is my interpretation of part of what you said. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, and well, but again, I would slightly kind of reframe what you said, because whenever we really feel that we would like to be happier, we are drawn to something, it means that there is some potential for happiness right now for us. And it's very specific, because sometimes it's like created by some discomfort, right? So there is something specific that makes us unhappy. We may not be aware of it, but if we want so intensely something else that we will, buy the book or listen to someone and try this practice, it means that there was something. So there was this initial understanding, and it's interesting to see what was that particular thing. Doing, kind of abstracting and making us this uncomfortable. There's one thing that I'm just concerned that I may forget, so I will bring it up. Just this crazy idea came up that there are these meditation methods, right? And teachers that describe the meditation method. And for example, I just realized that there's a one guy that wrote a really popular book, which presents the kind of spiritual development as a kind of on a linear slide. But also at some point he acknowledges that he seems to be the exception, because for him that's how it looked like. So it seems like there may be like a selection bias, right? That the people who kind of write or describe some very specific meditation methods, maybe that worked for them, but then they create like a legion of frustrated people who try to like follow their steps.
Right, because someone like you or me would not write a meditation book, because we would feel I don't know what to teach.
Yeah, we can just do like this discouraging sessions with maybe.
Right. Yes. Let me ask you. So, because we are engaged in, you have a version of your experience which is very specific. I have my journey, which is very specific, and it's my guess is that many other people have also a specific journey, which is reflective of their individual person and their individual circumstances and their individual mindset. What do we make out of the issue that sometimes it's called the map territory problem, right? So it's a kind of it's a topic in spiritual teachings, that the map is not the territory. And how I would interpret it now in our conversation, on the map things look easy, right? There are the streets, shows me where to go, and there seems to be no problem at all of getting there. You just take a little left turn there, and then you go straight, and then a second right, and then you are there. And this is, for me, how most meditation practices, books, teachings are presented, as if it's something simple. And we started our conversation with the experience that nothing of it is simple. For most people, I would say for 99% of people, every single thing becomes kind of, I have to translate it into my system so that it makes sense. I cannot just take the description of the Noble Eightfold Path, starting with right view, getting to right intentions, right speech, and so on. Nothing is that linear. It looks amazing and it's very appealing, especially for someone who's looking for answers. And then I come to a teaching which makes even sense. Maybe I meet a teacher who is charismatic. And I think like, yes, this is it. Finally, structure, order, a clear, meaningful path. Let me just pursue that, right? And for both of us, the experience is, no, it's not like that. Is there a problem with the way that things are presented? What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, it's a huge problem. and I think so. I think it's especially problematic maybe for our culture or maybe for some kind of subpopulations. It was really interesting, and I think this is really kind of relevant. There was this one meditation retreat when afterwards we were like talking like everyone was with everyone else, and we were sitting like with around one table, maybe 6 guys, like similar age. And it turned out that we all, our journey started with reading the same book, which we all agreed that it was like horse shit, sorry to say that, but it was completely unhelpful, but it was immensely motivating precisely because it promised this beautiful map, like a complete explanation, and also this promise of like perfecting yourself in this kind of like self-development way, which you discussed in like another episode, which was very useful. Or maybe, yeah, but basically improving yourself as you are right now, right? I will be perfect somehow. So it really, I think it rubs all the wrong parts, at least in my case, the map thing. But I don't know whether you can start without it. So again, we encounter this kind of paradox, right? That you get something that will turn out to be not so useful, but there's no other way to start. Like you have to start somehow. And you know, when we were speaking, I repeatedly had this thought that all these problems wouldn't be necessary with a good teacher. I didn't have like a personal teacher, because you also said like teachings, right? And obviously the sutta is also right about that. You know, someone heard the teachings and then they kind of proceeds, and in the woods that, you know, they've done the whole thing. But actually maybe even that is not true, because they came back to the Buddha and so on. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is that we very often kind of get hung up on our kind of misconceptions, and there's so many things that could be solved with other person, not just because they are teacher, but also because they see what we cannot see in a relationship, right? So this is where I think the therapy can help, because it's so difficult to notice some things that are obvious, kind of on the outside. And if that person is also like an experienced teacher, I think that would be more helpful. But again, maybe I'm kind of idealizing that because I didn't get that so much. But at least you would get some more adaptive kind of responses than just rereading the same passage, right? Which you keep understanding the same way, right?
Yes, and here I think there's a difference between the Buddhist and maybe a more Hindu approach in the modern sense. That in the other Indian traditions, I think there's more emphasis on the personal teacher, the personal guru. With the monastics, I'm not sure. They have certainly much more a personal relationship with some of the teachers, but lay practitioners in Buddhist practices, necessarily, I think they don't have a very close relationship to a teaching to a teacher that they have complete confidence in, right? They're often kind of sangha leaders, leaders of the spiritual groups. You have the sangha meetings, so there is a network for sure. There is a support network where people can exchange experiences, but someone that I as a practitioner have really faith in, that they would indeed see something from the outside that I don't see, is for lay practitioners probably not very available. And with when you ask people who had or maybe have a personal guru of some sort, at least they seem to be much more satisfied in that respect, that they're seen and that there is a personally encouraging factor there with having this personal relationship. Now, what do you think, what you said before is basically an hypothesis that maybe we all need debate in the beginning, something that catches our imagination, basically no matter if it's true or not, just to ignite this spiritual passion to develop this part of ours that has not much to do with the world and maybe more with our soul or with our energies or however you want to put it. And then with the trust that we would mature on that path, and then we kind of leave those advertisement maps, those promises behind, and can be our own journey. Can you think of a different path that is maybe without those false promises in the beginning?
I mean, I just when you said that, I realized that all the teachings have this property. Some people say that some teachings are kind of like a snake eating its own tail, or like. And again, I will say something completely unhelpful, but the gateless gate, like you arrive and you look back and you're done. So the teaching and the itself, it's like consumes itself and kind of disappears in a way. Yes. And this is interesting. Maybe there's something into it, that this is like inherent quality, right, of the teaching. Because again, to come back to the kind of more complex approach, we are not doing something like, it's not that I am doing something, I am changing myself, right? This is the path. I am changing myself, so everything changes and my understanding of the teaching changes. And when I arrive, no teaching is needed. So the teaching basically disappears because you can see it like everywhere. You just understand the reality in the way that like teaching kind of advertised. So So like on one extreme end, it has to turn out to be different than what you thought, but what you thought at the beginning. But the question is, could it be less frustrating and more helpful and useful and maybe kind of graceful evolution, right? I think so. I don't know. I always have feeling that I'm approaching all these things backwards, and maybe it has something to do with our culture as well, because there's so many people that want to jump straight into the transcendence, right? Yeah. And the exotic stuff, right? So for me also, this whole work with time, I have more and more kind of revulsion towards anything that sounds exotic. And in the beginning, it was like totally, wow, yeah, which tells a lot about us, right? About, I think, about the culture, that we want to kind of bypass something, right? So, and the natural progression would be completely different. What comes to my mind is what they do in kind of Tibetan Buddhism. They have this personal relationship with the teacher for the first like 8 or 10 years. They call it like preliminary practices, and they work just on a relationship. So it's some people say that this is like a therapy. Also in the kind of old school Buddhism, there's also, starting with generosity, and so on. So I think there is some kind of more natural progression, which comes from and this is maybe the key, that you start with the most gross kind of hindrances, and you go to the more subtle ones. And if you want to start with this really kind of subtle teachings of even like breath meditation, something that like everyone advertises on the internet and all the corporations and so on, when you start with completely kind of dysfunctional society and really like the message that we get ingrained into our minds, and this sounds, I know, really kind of trivial, but this is I mean, this is true. We are starting in one culture, and we want to go to different cultures. Some people say that this is like a different culture in a way. So so I'm sure that there could be different way, and much more sound and reasonable and more like progressive. But nothing comes to my mind except for this like meeting with some person that would see you and kind of point to you the right, you know, the most obvious stuff first.
Yes. Yes. When you were just saying that, I thought that yes, it would make more sense, this slow progression, if indeed it was embedded in a culture where children are raised and there's kind of an ethical code, when you know, parents and other people kind of show how and why an ethical behavior is more wholesome for themselves, for the people around them, and so that the mind is prepared maybe for simple observations, simple reflections on, you know, impermanence, on the goodness of heart, and so that it would lead maybe more naturally, without the frictions that you described, that we in our result-oriented, skipping, hacking society are used to. In a more natural way, the mind and the heart would develop so that they could, again, more naturally gravitate towards loving kindness and open heart and free mind, and to preserve these qualities. Okay, we didn't start with the conversation with the idea that we would solve these issues, obviously, but I hope that we achieved a little bit more of an understanding that this that it's not unusual to get into a muddy, messy path when we start to look within ourselves, because our inside is typically muddy and messy, and that any spiritual practice would reveal that, and that we somehow have to deal with that. Any last words from you?
Yeah, so maybe one word of encouragement.
Yes, please.
When you were just saying just that, I would say, yeah, you have no idea probably where this path will lead you, but at least it will lead you somewhere. And not doing that will keep you in circles for the rest of your life.
Right, yes, that's an important point. There is a point to spiritual practice. It might not be the advertised version, but if we enter with good faith and a real interest in the mind and mind development, there's a good chance that we get something out of it.
Oh, and maybe one last thing. If it was advertised, like, isn't it even more rewarding that you kind of discover the path on your own, versus like, yeah, it turned out just to be exactly what I read in that book like 10 years ago. I mean, that's much more rewarding if actually you have to put some effort and it turns out to be much more relevant to your life in the ways that you have never dreamt of than this book that you read 10 years ago. So,
yes. But it's more personal. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Amiran, for this personal insight.
Thank you, Gabriel.
I hope that people get something out of it.